Mr. DeGarmo, would you complete the roll call, please?
Chair Clark,
Present.
Vice Chair McCann,
Present.
Commissioner Baker,
Here.
Commissioner Flanagan,
Present.
Commissioner Friedman,
Present.
Commissioner Futterman,
Present.
Commissioner Garrett, Commissioner Gauthier,
Present.
Commissioner Goins,
Present.
Commissioner Miller is excused. We have a quorum.
Thank you. I would like to welcome everybody tonight. Welcome to the commissioners, to the city staff, and to the visitors that we have at the back of the room. We will be having public comment in a few moments, and so you'll have an opportunity to speak at that time. But next, I'll move on to the acceptance of the agenda. The agenda from the February 18th, from the I wrote it wrong. Okay, excuse me. The agenda for this meeting was emailed to all of you on February 13th per the city policy, and it was posted also on that date. Is there a motion to accept the agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second? Thank you. Is there any discussion? Commissioner Friedman.
Just for the record, correct in meeting minutes, where it says January 21, 2019, I just noticed that should be 2020, so.
Okay.
Just correct that for the full final version. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so all in favor of accepting the agenda, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no.
Abstain.
Thank you. Agenda is accepted. The next item on the agenda is the city manager and staff comments.
All right, thank you. So lots of things to cover today. There is a lot happening and a lot going to be happening over the next few months. So at the January 30th meeting of City Council, they talked about the meeting time change, which we will talk about a little bit later in our agenda. Talked a little bit about the language access policy, so all of the notices that we put out now need to be in Spanish and English. So you'll be seeing a little bit of change in our notices. There was a Cogen post-construction services contract that was issued for, I think it's 5 years. So we should be having some more activity on the Cogen facility. And then there was a DCE update about the launch on the 30th as well, and we'll talk more about that later as well. February 13th meeting, the one that just happened, the landscape architecture services contract was approved for the airport turf conversion projects. The future meeting dates that the council had identified included an April 2nd study session on plastics. And I did have a conversation with David Reddy a little bit about schedule, and so it looks like what we're going to do is schedule the climate action discussion for March 26th. And then depending on how that agenda looks, if it needs to shift, then what we'll do is we'll combine it with the plastics discussion on April 2nd. So those are the two dates to keep in mind as we go forward. They also asked for along with the general plan update, some explanation of how biking was going to be made a more viable choice for the city. So that'll be part of the development of the general plan. And then we did have a meeting with businesses through the business retention subcommittee to talk about the bike share RFP that we received. And so that will go to council for their consideration at probably the March 26th meeting as well. So the February 27th meeting coming up, I think that the only thing that may or may not end up on that agenda is a consent calendar item delivering the smoking ordinance discussion that we had at our meeting back in March and February. Although they may pull that and we may do a little bit more work on that, and we'll talk about that in a minute. I think that is, the only other thing is the March 12th meeting of City Council, what we're going to do is we're going to have an EV the violation policy for parking in an EV space, which we will also talk about a little bit later. But that'll go to council hopefully on March 12th. So lots coming up. And I think that's it on the council updates. On the airport turf conversion, I mentioned that council approved the budget for starting the turf conversion projects for the design phase. The kickoff meeting for that will likely be next week. It might be on either, I think we're trying to schedule on Tuesday or Wednesday of next week. And so we'll go through and walk the site and talk to the architect and designers and talk to them about the various parameters that we laid out in the scope of work. So that will be scheduled next week. And then we'll be scheduling also some sessions with the commission to get your input along the way as well. The DCE launch and outreach, that's getting kicked off. And so there were some videos that were done with Council Member Middleton and Mayor Coors, and both of those videos are posted on our website. And they'll be shared more broadly, including potentially at the Palm Springs Cultural Center before some of our movies. So you'll be seeing a lot of those in various places. And then the letters for everybody will be going out here shortly as well. And David can talk a little bit more about some of the public meeting schedules and that kind of thing that are planned. Greenhouse gas inventory update. I just wanted to mention that I have had some back and forth with the contractor that we were going to hire to do that inventory. They're going to revise their scope and their proposal to us, and so hopefully we'll get that approved here in the next couple of weeks, and so we can move forward with starting that inventory. One thing to note about that is as we are doing more research on the wastewater treatment plant and talking more about that, one of the things I noticed was that emissions inventory was done in 2010, which was before a lot of the upgrades were made to the wastewater treatment plant. So a lot of the landscape there has changed. So those numbers will be quite different, I think, when we do the inventory this time around, which is the reason we want to get that done soon. Hiking trail signs, you might have noticed that there are some new hiking trail signs up around the city, directing people back to the trails and the mountains. So that was part of a request from the Convention and Visitors Bureau to help promote some of our more sustainable activities and environmentally focused activities. And so those are going up, or those went up, and I think there are a couple more that we're going to put up as well. So there might be a few more that we add to the mix. And then sustainability outreach, I have had some conversations with Chris Cunningham from Palm Springs Disposal Services. We are planning on doing some very targeted outreach to the residential community and multifamily residential community on recycling here probably in the March-April timeframe. We're also going to be doing an in-person session at the center also in April. And so hopefully we'll get more word out about proper recycling practices, especially on the multifamily level. We're going to invite them to invite us to their meetings and to their HOAs and things like that, so that we can talk about the proper recycling activities in their neighborhoods. And then also be on the lookout for the April issue of Poolside Magazine. There will be 2 articles in there on desert community energy, and 1 article from me on the 25th anniversary of Earth Day, and then an ad in there from Palm Springs Disposal on proper recycling practices. So a big environmental issue of Poolside. And in case you don't know what Poolside is, it is the Chamber of Commerce magazine that they put out, I think, quarterly. So the city has some portion of that, and then there's some businesses and advertisements and things like that in there. Then I think that's about it on the outreach front. We of course have lots of things going on, and we're going to be pushing communication out through various media. But again, those are some highlights of what's happening. And I think that's it in terms of my comments to get us rolling. So.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any questions for Manager Tallarico?
Great.
Okay. The next item on the agenda is public comments. This time is for members of the public to address the Sustainability Commission on agenda items and items of general interest within the subject matter jurisdiction of the commission. The commission values your comments, but pursuant to the Brown Act, cannot take action on items not listed on the posted agenda. 3 minutes are assigned for each speaker. Would either of you like to make public comment this evening?
Sure. This is my first time here. My name is
Please come up to the table and state your name.
So correct me if I say the wrong thing or out of line. I'll stick to what's on here. My name is Tony Crone, and I'm a resident of Palm Springs. And I appreciate the fact that I can be here. I'm particularly interested in, there's 3 that have linkage to me in the city manager staff comments, the GHD inventory update, and how that might link to the sustainability outreach and what will end up happening there. So I'm sure by being here and listening and reading, what's documented, I'll get up to speed on that. And then down to the old business, the climate action roadmap. I've read almost all of what was done, I believe, in the 2016 report. And so I'm just interested in seeing what's happened since 2016. And also, what the measurables are. And I also had a question, if it's relevant, or what are the benchmark cities, to Palm Springs, or if we look at other cities in California or the region as far as what would we strive for? And then on a very personal note, the leaf blower. So I'll be interested to hear what's happening with that with old business, because every Monday I have about an hour of people right below me who are using the old leaf blowers. So that'll just be a point of interest for me. But I'm dominantly here to see what Palm Springs' plan is for greenhouse gases, sustainability, and what that roadmap will be going forward, and what the approach is, because I'd like to help if it's possible. Okay? Thanks.
Thank you. And hopefully we'll have answers to your questions as we go through the meeting this evening.
Good evening. My name is Christopher Rosner, and I appreciate everything that the Commission's doing to help the city and the community and the world. We are obviously in a climate crisis, and I think it's verging on an emergency. And one of the things I'd like to push for is an emergency declaration of climate emergency. There are over 24 cities in California who have already done that. There are a couple of hundred in the United States and over 1,000 in the world. It's not just Northern California cities. It's not just tree-hugging cities. It's places like Sacramento and Chico and Yuba City, San Diego, Los Angeles. It's pretty mainstream, and I think it sets a real commitment to the way not just this group, but the entire city is going to look at future decisions, taking climate into account. So I urge the Commission to reconsider that. And on the greenhouse gas emissions, I'm also interested in hearing about that, because I know that I read that we have met our previous emissions, which I think was 1990. And I don't know exactly how we know we've met that if we haven't had an inventory. But hopefully I'll learn that. And the last thing is the plastic ordinance. I don't know exactly where that is. I know there was public comment, and I heard, I think on April 2nd, it'll go to City Council. And I'd like to, if there's still time, urge a little more teeth in that. New York City has just banned all plastic within all of the city operations. And I think one step further to look to be on the forefront is to ban, most water bottles, Gatorade bottles, those are single use, but somehow they get exempted from single-use ordinances. So I'd like, if there's time, for you to consider that and maybe being on the forefront of putting a little bit more teeth in the single-use plastic ordinance. Thanks again for all your work.
Thank you. Okay. So now we'll move on to the next item in the agenda, which is the meeting minutes. They were also emailed and posted on Thursday, the 13th of February, per city policy. Is there a motion to accept the minutes?
So moved.
Yeah, is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. And I didn't note that this, of course, was the January 21st meeting minutes. Is there any discussion on the minutes in addition to the change of the date? Okay. If not, all in favor of accepting the minutes from January 21st, the January 21st meeting, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No? Abstain. We have 3 abstentions. Okay. Now we'll move on to old business. The first item is single-use plastics ordinance.
Okay, thanks. So there hasn't been have not been any changes to the ordinance since you guys saw it last. As was mentioned, there will be a study session on April 2nd to go through that with council. But I intend that will be a larger discussion about kind of the state of recycling, the state of organics, and things like that that impact the decisions and the thinking that went into that drafting of that ordinance. I also plan to present several other information about what other cities are doing, so people have context about kind of where we fall on the spectrum in terms of how stringent we are or not so stringent versus other cities. So anyway, so that will be a pretty full discussion, and I don't expect that it will not just be a standard presentation of the ordinance as it is, but rather the ordinance in context of all those other things. And so that council will have a good sense of what others are doing and what direction they would like to go based on that. So anyway, so I intend that will be a pretty full discussion, and we hope to have some businesses represented at that meeting as well, to have a more robust conversation about kind of pros and cons and what people's ideas are. So stay tuned for that for April 2nd. I did talk to the city manager about format for that, and it will be pretty similar to a council meeting, although it sounds like we have a little bit more flexibility in terms of engaging with council and asking them questions and kind of probing for answers and that kind of thing. So my intent is to leave there with a very clear picture of what that ordinance will look like and what their preference is one way or the other on various issues. So anyway, so that's the plan for April 2nd. I will be preparing the staff report and present that back to you guys at the March meeting, so you guys have a sense of what that looks like going into the meeting, and there'll be time for you guys, I think, to provide a little feedback after that meeting as well. So hopefully we'll have a good discussion at that meeting, and I know that there's lots of interest in doing something, and so we'll see how it shakes out. I was also hoping to have at that meeting maybe a couple speakers, a couple businesses come in, like Native Foods, who presented at our small stakeholder workshop, and the folks from Coffee to come in because they've already made some changes, and then maybe the folks from the Cultural Center we've been working with on some pilots. So anyway, so to get some different perspectives from businesses about what they're doing or what's hard, what's not hard. So then. I think that's it on plastics. Any other questions on that front? Okay. All right, Leafblower Enforcement enhancements. As I mentioned at the last meeting, our code enforcement folks have stepped up their efforts, and they continue to issue a fair amount of citations. I think we issued about 12 or so the first half of this month, so we're averaging about one a day at least. It was interesting. They had an encounter with one repeat violator who was issued a $500 fine, whose response to them was, "I'm just going to keep doing this." So I thought that was very interesting. And so I think it's those people that we're really trying to figure out how to manage in terms of our response. And so what I'm doing for that particular company, and then there's another company that I think we've issued about 5 citations to, and is to contact each one of the homeowners where they were caught, and to just let them know that they've now been issued several citations, and we're really looking to them to help us with this effort. Generally, when I have sent stuff to homeowners, I've gotten a pretty good response. And so anyway, so I think that's the only way that's going to change is either we get the homeowners on board to essentially release them from their service if they continue to do this, or if we have some other mechanism to take away some of their license to operate, which a lot of them don't even have business licenses. So
Are
so
the
that-
repeat violators paying their fines each time?
So that's a good question, and so that's the other piece that I want to follow up with code enforcement on is to figure out if they're actually paying. Because if they're not paying, then we need to figure out some way to get them to
Because
pay.
we have the same problem with the dog. People violate the dog rules too. They said that we're just going
Yeah.
to keep doing it regardless.
Right.
With their dog, bringing their dogs.
Yeah.
I have one other question.
Yep.
Are you done? But about gated communities, I was with someone today and they said, oh, we have a gated community. They can't do enforcement in there, so we have no enforcement. And have you addressed that before with me?
So we've done that a couple of different things. One is there are sometimes when homeowners within gated communities call to issue a complaint, they will give us they will give the code enforcement folks the gate code so that they can get in. And then I think there are some places where we do have a gate code where we can get into. So anyway, so there's some variability there, but sometimes that they can't get in. You're right, and that's a problem. So
And I believe the police department has codes for
Right.
all of the gated communities. And code enforcement is part of the police department.
right. So it seems like they should be able to get access if they needed it. The other thing I will mention is that I'm still having an ongoing conversation with the citizens on patrol that enforce our parking to see if they can expand their purview and look at leaf blower use as well. So anyway, so I'm hoping that if we can get them on board too, then that will add a whole other cadre of folks that are watching out for these things.
One more
yeah,
point
go
there
ahead.
is Lieutenant Villegas reported at the last 1PS Code Enforcement and Public Works meeting that code compliance now is fully staffed. I think they have 7 officers,
Yeah.
and they do operate 7 days a week, so that makes them more effective with citing leaf blower abusers.
Right. And so what's been interesting is they have been really stepping up on the enforcement side and issuing a lot more citations. The other thing that we're noticing is that I think there is still some confusion among residents about what is a gas-powered leaf blower and what is an electric leaf blower. So we've gotten several complaints in certain areas about continued use of gas-powered leaf blowers, only to find out that they are electric leaf blowers. And even when I call and follow up with the homeowner, they say, I've seen him out there. He has a cord. It's an electric leaf blower. So anyway, so even when we're following up with the homeowner, we're finding that we get the feedback that it's electric as well. So that's not to say that it's not happening, but the feedback that we're getting is there are some places that I think people are still probably confused about that use. So moving forward, the kind of the changes that I would make to what I had put forward before in terms of the increasing the fines, I think that we need to kind of still start out with a $100 and $250 level, but then once we get to the third and subsequent ones, I think we need to increase that to $1,000. So that it's more of a deterrent potentially, and like you were saying, Jim, is to make sure that people are actually paying those fines when they are issued. I did have a conversation with the state, and they are increasing their incentive program for electric-powered lawn equipment. So they will become even cheaper for people if they want to exchange. And then the other idea that I'm working to figure out is to see whether or not the city can purchase about 3 or 4 electric units and have them at Yoshi Lawnmower Shop so that people could check them out if they bring a unit in that needs to be repaired, so they don't have an excuse to go back to their gas one whenever it's being repaired. Yeah, like a loaner, and then usually they're in and out of there in a day, so it's just a day for each of them. So that's the other thing we're looking for. So I'm trying to figure out ways to solve the problems that I've heard from the gardeners up to this point. So that's it on leaf blowers.
Thank you.
So the next one is EV charging locations. Our conversations continue to progress. We are meeting with Southern California Edison and ChargePoint representatives tomorrow at SCE to talk through the various questions that they have about the locations and hopefully get everything answered so that we can get a proposal from ChargePoint to install the new EV chargers in the various locations that we've got around the city that I shared with you guys last time. The other thing that I will mention is that we did receive a $40,000 grant from the state to from was it the state or AQMD? I think it was the state. To install a level 3 charger as opposed to 4 hours. So, yeah.
And are you skimming, I mean, I've read a lot of stuff where there's just a ton of rebates coming down the line, both from air quality management districts, from mitigation funds, and from California EV goals. It seems like more and more money is going to be down the pipeline. You're keeping an eye out for those, or if we see them, I can send them to you?
Yeah, certainly if you see stuff,
Okay.
send it to me
Yeah.
because this was, we got this money fairly randomly. I was told about this program a while ago, and then they said they didn't have any money. And then I was talking to somebody else, and somebody said that they did have money. And so I just submitted an application, which took like 2 minutes. And then I just got the notification last week. So I think that's what's happening is people are reserving funds and then not using them. And so there's money going back into the pot. So as long as your name is in the queue, then you're sort of in line to get an award. So anyway, so hopefully we'll continue to do that. And if we can find some other spaces that we want to put one, we can add some more spaces to the list too. So, and then I know the other one that is getting refunded is Southern California Edison's Charge Ready program, which provides funding to cities that do multiple installations in one location. So like if you do 10 or more chargers, then they will help with the infrastructure behind that. So help you get the power to the place that you want it to be. So that funding is going to be refreshed, I think, either mid-year or late this year. So, yeah. All right. So Climate Action Roadmap. One of the things I included in your packet, and if folks didn't see it in the audience, there is the whole draft staff report and climate action roadmap that was submitted to, or will be submitted to council for that conversation whenever that conversation happens. And so as you recall, one of the reasons that we did the climate action roadmap was because based on conversations with Christy Holstage, there was a request to know more about the kinds of things that we were doing and what we were planning to do and what we'd already done. So that roadmap lays out some of those things to just at least inform people to say this is what's going on so that everybody's on the same page. So the intent behind that climate action roadmap discussion is kind of twofold. One is to get some feedback from council on very specific things that we've been thinking about or talking about, and just to make sure that we're moving in a direction that they like and that they want to see, and also to get their input on any other additional things that they think that we should be doing on this front, including the issuance of some sort of a climate emergency declaration. So that's in there, and I've included actually a few examples in there for their consideration too. And so anyway, so hopefully we'll get some feedback from them about what kinds of things that they want to do moving forward that we're not already doing or are not already looking at. So, and that, again, we were trying to structure that as part of a regular council meeting, but if it doesn't get on an agenda for that, then it'll be part of our study session that'll happen on April 2nd. But my intent is to have that conversation before April or at the beginning of April so that we can, if there are some commitments that the council wants to make, that we can get that on the agenda and get those rolling before the summer ends or before the summer rolls around. So anyway, so I think that's where we are with the climate action roadmap. And I'll just mention a few things because it was asked about the greenhouse gas inventory. So the greenhouse gas inventory update is the first item on the roadmap. And that is very intentional because, like I said before, I don't know that we know where we are anymore in terms of our goals. So we have many goals that were outlined in the sustainability plan. And one of those, again, was the reduce our greenhouse gas emissions to 1990 levels by 2020. And as was mentioned, when they did the initial inventory, we were below that level at that time. And so I think it is a stretch to say that we are still below that level, given all the growth that we've had in the city over the last several years. So we've also done things to offset that. So there are a lot of things that have happened since then in terms of the solar array at the wastewater treatment plant and all that. So anyway, so I think both things have happened to probably increase our emissions, but things may have happened to also bring them down. So I'm very curious to see what that emissions inventory says. One of the things that they are doing as part of that roadmap effort, or I'm sorry, the inventory effort, is that they are going back to the 2010 inventory, and they are updating that so that we can actually compare it to current levels. When they did that initial inventory, apparently the transportation portion of that inventory was not done in quite the standard way. And so what they're going to do is they're going to go ahead and back through and redo the transportation portion so that we have that data in a little bit different format, and then bring all of the other stuff up to date in terms of emissions factors and things like that are being used now, so that we can do an apples to apples comparison from then to now. So that's part of the what they're going to be working on too. So it should be very informative. I think it should be an interesting process, and we'll see how that goes. And hopefully it can be done fairly quickly as well. So
I just wanted to thank you for the staff report. I thought it was extremely well written, and particularly the section on page 5 where you listed the things that you would like the council to respond to. I think that should be very effective.
yeah, I was really trying to zero in on what are the key questions that we want them to answer for us. And so again, if you guys look at that and you see some additional stuff that you think we need to get out of that conversation, feel free to let me know and I'll add it in there. But I think that's my understanding of kind of where we are with what we want to hear from them at this point. Again, given that we've got DCE rolling out, and we have pretty high expectations in terms of the impact that that's going to make on our overall greenhouse gas emissions. There's certainly other stuff that we could be doing, but that's sucking up a lot of attention and time right now, and energy. So anyway, where we go from here is anybody's guess, and there's certainly a lot more that we could do. But anyway, I think that lays things out in a pretty good, clear way in terms of what we are doing and what we have planned. So.
Yes, thank you.
Could you repeat what you said about the council requested more information about bicycles in the climate roadmap?
Not in the climate roadmap, in the general plan update.
Okay.
So that's another thing that we should be paying attention to, is the general plan update, because there are a lot of sustainability components that will get into that plan. Like all of our bike infrastructure was part of the previous plan, and so this request about becoming
Is
a more.
open space in there as well?
I believe that there's probably some component of open space in there. So I don't know that much about it. I know that there's going to be, their first public meeting is coming up. Is it 24th? Monday. Okay, yeah, so it's Monday. So that'll be an interesting one, I think, to go to see what they say about what the approach is.
So should we be more active in that, or is that something we should wait?
So I think John has been asked to be a representative on whatever the committee is that's focused on the general plan update, and so hopefully that'll be our in terms of some of the sustainability topics, and he can bring that back to us as they go forward.
Yeah, and I'm happy to do that either formally or informally, whatever the commission thinks is appropriate.
Right.
So and if you see something you might steer to one of us, you can talk to us then?
Yeah.
Okay, great, thank you.
Cool. Okay. And then the final thought, final comment on climate action is that, as you know, we have our Sustainable Film Festival series, and so the next one is next Thursday, which unfortunately coincides with the council meeting. So if nothing's on the council meeting, then I will be there. But I would encourage everybody that has networks in terms of climate action to send a note out to all of them and let them know that that movie is happening. I think it's going to get, our last movie got about 400 people and it was actually full. So people should definitely register with Eventbrite and not expect to show up and be able to get in. I think that they have moved that to the big theater anyway, so we'll have capacity there. But again, if there's a lot of buzz about climate action, and so this is a movie that reflects that, and so I expect that it might get a big turnout. So.
And the name of the film is Paris to Pittsburgh?
Paris to Pittsburgh, yes. So, all right, and then final topic, literally hot off the presses. So I think you might, so as you might remember, and a couple of you may not have been here at that time, but the commission talked about a potential smoking ordinance to limit smoking in public places. And so like outdoor patios and things like that. And so this commission went through and thought about what are the components of that and what would they like to put forward. And so this commission developed a draft ordinance, thanks largely to Carl's help. That draft ordinance was, at least in theory, put together as a receive and file for city council, but apparently it never quite made it to them. So anyway, and nor did the other draft ordinance, which was prepared by the Human Rights Commission. So there was some discussion about that topic being with council, and so a few months ago, council decided to issue that back to us as a topic for us to consider in our discussions. So that topic has come back to us, and the request that was made was that we convene some sort of a stakeholder study session to talk through it and to get some broader perspective on the components that people like, don't like, and give that feedback to council so that they could actually have a more complete discussion about what that ordinance would contain. So that's where that topic stands. Roy, did I miss anything else?
I just wanted to explain a little bit more about the background because a lot of it was done before you joined us.
Right.
But I think it was in the summer of 2018 that we had quite a few discussions about elements of the smoking ordinance, and there were some residents of Palm Springs that were very vocal and that attended our meetings and participated in discussions. But I believe it was in October that we took a look at a list of 10 elements that were proposed to be part of the smoking ordinance, and we voted on them one by one. Mm-hmm. And I believe 5 of them we voted in favor of. And then the next step was that Commissioner Baker developed a draft ordinance, and he took those recommendations into account in the draft ordinance. And then it was in February of 2019 that we voted on the draft ordinance itself, and it passed. And then there was a submission to the City Council, which apparently didn't make it all the way, as Patrick was explaining, but that was the last step that we took, is to submit that ordinance that we had passed as a whole to the City Council.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, John, go ahead.
So you mentioned that there was an ask that the city council was asking us to do some neighborhood stakeholder study sessions?
So it wouldn't, well, not necessarily neighborhood stakeholder sessions, but rather hold a study session. I think that would be a good place to start, but then also reach out to some of the organizations like the hospitality organization, the restaurants organization, some of the other groups that would potentially be impacted to share the thoughts with them and see what their feedback is. So, yeah. Yep.
One thing I think we're overlooking is, Human Rights Commission also had a similar ordinance, and both were submitted to city last year.
That's right.
And evidently they just didn't read them. But so we still shouldn't move forward with those. First checking with Human Rights Commission to make sure everyone's on the same page, because they invest a lot of time and energy on the same topic.
So we should probably coordinate with them just to let them know that we're taking it on. and see how we can integrate those ideas, or at least present some options for people where ours differed.
That's a good point, thanks.
Yeah.
So really one big question is, when do we do this? Because we have quite a few major things that we're working on right now.
Right.
The plastics.
Right.
And so forth. The climate action plan, where we will be having study sessions with the city council as well. So I don't know how we answer that question. We were talking to Mayor Kors right before the meeting, and he did encourage us to set up that study session with the businesses and neighborhoods as was just described.
So that's an excellent question. The other thought that I had is whether or not we want to make any changes to that ordinance based on the last meeting that we had, because we did talk about and had some comments on the draft ordinance, but we didn't really incorporate them because we were sort of passing it along. So I don't know if it's worth taking another look at that and seeing what what changes we need to make to that to make it, like as we noted in there, make it more consistent with the cannabis policy and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, so I think that's worth doing just to kind of close that, kind of finalize that package so that those kinds of questions don't sort of linger and get addressed during the study session. And then I think from that, then we could maybe figure out a schedule. But I can't imagine it happening before May. And even then, it would be, I think, a little hard. But I think May is probably going to be our limit in terms of how long we could go. So.
And one point about the cannabis as well is the cannabis ordinance was changed.
Right.
Since we had that discussion. I'm not sure how the changes impacted, but that's something that we should look specifically at.
Right.
But
Right.
I remember that comment about looking at the cannabis ordinance. So does anybody else have any comments? I think Patrick's comment about perhaps May, that's a good suggestion, considering that we also have all the Earth Day activities coming up in April. There's a lot going on, but we should have that on our radar and proceed to move forward.
Right.
Commissioner Garrett.
About the issue of the disposal of the cigarette butts, which from my reading, the number one most littered item in the United States is cigarette butts, billions a day, literally. So if you pile all those up, not only do they not biodegrade, or it's such a long period of time, essentially they're non-biodegradable. So they're also filled with carcinogenic toxins. So you start amassing those, they go into the water systems, they litter on the street. They're everywhere. I pick up out in front of my building every morning. I understand that the restaurants and that don't allow smoking, but they don't really provide suitable facilities. So the customers go outside, have a smoke, go back in, and throw their cigarettes on the street. So
Yeah, so when in the updated staff report that I did to transmit it to City Council potentially this next council meeting, I included that issue in there too, because we had not really addressed that in our conversations. It was really just about the smoking piece. So I imagine that will be part of the conversation as well. So.
I'd just like to ask Commissioner Baker, you brought up the Human Rights Commission's ordinance. Would you be willing to speak to somebody on the commission and let them know that we've been asked to set up this study session and plan how we can coordinate with them?
Sure, of course.
Okay.
I just need to know who to contact.
Right, okay. We'll help you with that. Thank you. Any more discussion on the smoking ordinance, where we're going with that? Okay. So now we move on to new business. The first item is parking fines for non-electric vehicles.
So I have a super exciting topic to share with you. So in the all of the efforts that went into getting the EV chargers in place and putting them around the city in the first go-round back in 2013, there was one item that they overlooked in their development of all of that, and so it was the bail schedule for what to do if a car is parked in an EV charging spot, but it's not charging. So if it's not connected to a charger. So, and I want to be clear about that. So it's when a car of any sort is parked in an EV charging space and it's not connected to the charging device. Okay, so if an EV an electric vehicle is charged there and it's connected to the device, it's okay.
So can it be connected but not charging? I mean,
Yes.
So you
that's
charge in a half an hour, you can stay there all day.
Right. So you can only stay 2 hours. So that's when the time issue comes in, and then you would be given a ticket for overstaying your time.
So that's already covered.
So that's covered in a different ordinance or different bail amount. So what I did was I tried to look at some other cities to see what they're charging for this, and I think actually the trend is to increase the amount of fine. So if you want to go to the next page, so Riverside County has a fine of $41, and Rancho Mirage and Palm Desert both basically access Riverside County for their enforcement of things like that, and so they would follow Riverside County. Los Angeles was $58, and then it escalates. San Diego was $100, and then the state of Washington was $154, and one that they just passed, and state of Colorado also recently passed one that was $150. So there is a body that I can't remember what the name of it is right now, but that actually recommends bail amounts for various fines or various violations. And so for the state of California, the recommended fine amount for this violation is $100, which is what San Diego followed. And that recommendation has been around for a while, so I'm not sure when Riverside County actually did theirs, or LA did theirs, but anyway, theirs is lower than that recommended amount. What I am actually proposing is to go in at the $100 level. And for a couple of reasons. One is that in my brief exchanges with the citizens on patrol, who are the ones that enforce this, they felt like $36, I think, which is the amount that they get ticketed for other sorts of parking violations, isn't really enough to defer somebody if they couldn't find another parking space and they had to park in that kind of a space. But $100 might be. And so the other thing is that I feel like this is going to be an increasing problem for the city as we get more EV spaces in places that people really want to park, and the town gets more popular, and there's less other parking spaces available. So I think this is the instances of this are just going to increase. So I think if we set the amount fairly high, then that'll probably be a good deterrent for us. And we'll, of course, have to post this on the different EV charging spaces so that people know what the fine is. But anyway, so that is my proposal. And so I guess I'm seeking council input and in terms of that recommendation, if you agree with that, or if you'd like to talk about it and propose something else.
So I think if we're going to make a decision and discuss it, we should have a motion.
Mm-hmm.
And then once we've had the motion and the second, then we can have some discussion. And we can always change the motion as a result of the discussion. So would somebody like to make a motion to set the fine at $100?
Yes.
Commissioner Friedman?
I would like to move to accept staff's recommendation that the fine for occupying an electric vehicle charging station without actually charging be set at $100, which is the state recommendation.
Is there a second? Commissioner Baker? Okay. Discussion.
I have one more question. So if a Tesla parks in the underground parking space by the museum, do they pay the parking fees to park there in addition?
So there is no parking fee to park
Oh,
there.
to park
In the underground lot?
Oh.
Mhm.
Why did I think it was, okay, well, never mind then.
It looks very exclusive because it's Tesla, but it's not.
Maybe going to the Hyatt.
Right.
Okay.
No, it's free.
But I had a related question,
Yeah.
because this would also apply to the Tesla, somebody parking in the Tesla spot and not using that, or it would just be the city installed
So that's a
chargers?
really good question. It depends on the ownership of the space. So if it's our parking garage and it's our spaces, then it's our rules that would apply, I believe, regardless of who the charging agent is.
Okay,
Yeah.
fine. I mean, on private property, it's not going to apply because that's not on the city right away.
Right, and hotels and things like that. it
No,
wouldn't apply.
I disagree, because we have 2 charging stations on DAP property, which is our property, which we do not own. The city enforces that.
Okay. Interesting.
And I saw, actually, for the first time in 3 years, I actually saw a car come by last week and check the spaces to see that the car wasn't there over 2 hours.
The city owns the charging equipment or the space?
Charging equipment.
Yeah, so we installed it at DAP, and I don't know what the backstory was. The Camelot is the other one where that occurs. So those are good questions. I'll try to figure that out. All right.
But that would be different, like on the tribe land.
Yeah.
If the new sports facility had a EV parking, the city wouldn't have any jurisdiction.
And if some business on their own, like a hotel, puts up a charging station, presumably the city would not be able to enforce that. They could, it would just be like, illegal parking. They would tow away or something like
Right,
that.
right.
But
They would have their own
thank you.
policy.
It sounds like it's a somewhat more nuanced ordinance that you
Yeah,
have to deal with.
I will look at the way that that's worded and see if I can get some help from the lawyers on that.
Ace Hotel has Tesla parking just for Teslas, but there's
Yeah.
no enforcement.
Yeah. Okay.
Any other comments?
Yeah, why is it free to park in the parking garage?
Because it's free to park everywhere in Palm Springs.
Why do cars get subsidies and bikes and people don't? But I don't know. A lot of people would argue that.
All right. Anything else? Okay.
So are we ready to vote on the motion that has been made? Okay. So all in favor of the motion made by Commissioner Friedman to follow the recommendation with the fine being $100, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. So was it unanimous? Yes, it is.
Great. Thank you. All right. I'll turn it over to you for the meeting start time.
Okay. Yeah, as Patrick mentioned earlier, there's been discussion in the city council about moving commission and board meetings to the evening to allow more people who otherwise couldn't attend during the day to attend, an effort to increase inclusivity in boards and commissions. And the request is, and I'm not sure that I got the final one, but it's that the meetings either all meetings start at 5:30 or meetings start no earlier than 5:30.
I actually looked at that this afternoon, and it was at the council discussion. They actually do want a uniform start time of 5:30.
Okay, and that was in the discussion that I heard as well, because that would stick in everybody's mind. 5:30 is the evening meeting time. So really the question for us is the effectivity. When do we want to do this? Fortunately, we'd only have to move a half hour, so the impact shouldn't be great, but we certainly need to take into account the impacts that it might have on any of the people, any of the commissioners. I don't think we need to vote on it, but I think we can do it by consensus.
We actually do need to vote because the ordinance says motion or resolution.
Okay.
Sorry, but to be picky, but I looked at that this
Okay.
afternoon.
So there is an ordinance that.
The ordinance actually says by
Okay.
motion. The ordinance adopted by council, I have the staff report,
Okay, that's-
it says by motion or
okay.
resolution. So I would be willing to make a motion when we're ready for that.
Okay. I think we should have a motion so we can have some discussion.
Pursuant to the ordinance adopted by City Council on second reading on January 30th, I would like to move that the Sustainability Commission meetings start at 5:30, and I would move that we begin that actually in March as opposed to April, but That's the motion that we do adopt. We immediately adopt that the ordinance is effective in another couple days because it's 30 days after January 30th.
Is there a second? Commissioner Gauthier? Is there any discussion on the motion?
My only question is March versus April. I just think April gives the public a little more time to digest it, but it doesn't matter to me
That's fine.
personally.
Council said expected by April. I don't feel strongly about that, so maybe we get a consensus. I don't mind me waiting to April. The advantage of April is that the agenda for today,
Right.
preference would be March, but the agenda for today actually does say 5 o'clock. So I would accept a friendly motion, consider that a friendly amendment to move to April, and that would be fine.
And it's daylight savings, so we can net out half an hour.
Well, as is March, but
Is it March?
I have one comment, just that if all the commission meetings are going to move to 5:30, hopefully then this would be an impetus to solve the problem of the locked doors out here and access to restrooms, because having to come in through this back door to a commission meeting is just a deterrent to public participation.
Yeah, I think that they have addressed that. So, so I think they've changed the schedule based on the scheduled meetings.
So that means that they would leave the door unlocked longer?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's my understanding.
That's already been done. We have a standing order for the door to remain open until 7:15 on commission evenings.
So,
Comment?
yes, Vice Chair.
So I oppose this for two reasons. The one is that I don't believe that for our particular meeting, half an hour is going to make any difference in participation because we don't typically have enough people that come from the public to hear our meetings anyway. And the other reason is completely personal and selfish. I would much prefer to get out of here as early as I possibly can each day. And our meetings often run past 2 hours anyway, so if it's another half an hour, then we're looking at close to 8 o'clock. So that's just my view on this. However, I don't quite understand, do we have the power to vote this down for our meeting? Or am I just going on the record as a dissent?
You're going on record.
Okay, then I am on record as dissenting.
But Patrick and I have had some discussions about this too, and, yes, we do go beyond 2 hours many times, and that will take us closer to 8 o'clock if we continue to do that. So, there are things that we can do to make the meetings more efficient. One of them is to spend less time on subcommittee reports. From the major subcommittees, solar and green building and waste reduction, we get a lengthy report every month. There's no need to go into more detail. Packet is sent out ahead of time. People have an opportunity to read the reports, and so we can minimize the time that we spend on those subcommittee reports, and certainly other subcommittees are welcome to submit reports in advance, but that's one place that we can be more efficient. I encourage you, I assume everybody reads all the material in the packets ahead of time, and one thing that is very helpful is that Patrick generally sends out with his email kind of like a staff report saying, please pay attention to this, that, and that. And I think that will be helpful in making the meetings more efficient. So we'll continue with that. So
I can also commit to, under the staff comments, just summarizing that and putting it into the packet and just provide if anything happened between the time that I sent that out and now, so that we can pretty much blow through that pretty quickly as well. So
that would be good.
Yeah.
Commissioner Goins?
I was going to wait till the last segment when we had the agenda items topic, but we're sort of discussing it now, so I'll bring it up now. But at the city council meetings, they do a staff report right before each item so that there's not any duplication between sort of earlier comments and later comments that happen during new business and old business. So that would be something that we could look out for, too, to also minimize the amount of time that we spend here.
Okay. Thank you. So I think there are things that we can do, and we're all in it together, and to make our meetings more efficient, but to keep them as effective as possible. So is there a friendly amendment to change it to April?
Yeah, I'll accept that.
Okay.
I've accepted
Okay.
that as a friendly amendment, so the motion would be to start 5:30 starting in April.
Okay, so that's the motion that we're going to be voting on? Okay. Ready to vote? All in favor of the motion to start the meeting time at 5:30 in April, please say aye.
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 Opposed?
Opposed.
Okay. Guess that's, let's see, 10, 9, 1. Okay, thank you. So I presume we need to coordinate with audiovisual and so forth. Jerry, okay. That's right. Okay. The next item under new business is the potential ban on Roundup. And several times Commissioner Garrett has brought up concerns about Roundup in our meetings. And we asked her to provide something more specific written to the commission so that we could have more of a discussion on that particular issue and include it as part of the agenda. And so you did find in the agenda packet a document from her entitled Roundup Ban. And I guess the question to start with is, does anybody have any comments on the document? Commissioner Friedman.
I have your typical nerdy 30 years as a lawyer comment. If I understood this correctly, the Malibu ordinance, the state seems to have preempted this area generally, and the Malibu ordinance is based on the fact that it's subject to coastal commission jurisdiction. So unless I'm missing something, I thought that actually that we would not be able to adopt the ordinance because the state essentially preempts that. So that was at least my impression in reading the materials, and perhaps I misread them, but that's the impression that I got, that Malibu had as an out that we would not necessarily have.
And kind of going along with that, there were a number of different chemicals that were brought up, and I interpreted that Roundup was neonic, and there was something different that in Malibu. So a question is, which chemicals are the biggest problem in Palm Springs? Many were mentioned.
I think the thing that's quite interesting about what the Malibu Council, the position they took, was not just on naming a single product or trademark, which can easily be changed. Formulas are easily tweaked to circumvent laws and regulations. So their position was banning all pesticides, rodenticides, herbicides, all the sides, basically for their community because of the impact. Now, a lot of recreation, and it's bottom line business. So my friend who had formerly been on the city council said that he felt that Palm Springs, even though we're not coastal, we do have a fragile and unique ecosystem here that is being threatened in the same way that Malibu was. So it affects all wildlife. In their case, they were focusing on the large predators, mountain lions, and that sort of thing. Then eat the smaller rodents and so on and so on. But it affects the entire community. So I think that that is a way to go. And if some communities are able to actually be dry and ban alcohol, or have blue laws still to this day, or don't allow sex industries and that type of thing, I would think that poisons of this classification should be handled in a more serious way. And my understanding is that the city of Palm Springs has discontinued use of these type of products. Our focus primarily is on with the pollinators and the small critters, but it's more than that. And now that Monsanto, as of last year, was purchased by Bayer, which is based in Germany, that creates a whole other problem if there's any litigation. And I don't think our concern is to sue Bayer for their production and distribution of poison, but to limit it or if not outright ban it in our community. And when you consider the amount of literally millions of dollars spent by the Mexican government as well as communities in the migration path of just the monarch butterflies alone, millions of dollars, why do we undermine that? And we can be giving out milkweed plants day and night, and yet we continue to pollute the environment. And just recently, thinking there's some in January, the local station announced that when they do the butterfly counts during migration for the western monarch, there typically would be about 5 million. Now it's about 27,000 or less. So this is a rapid decline. So all of our efforts and whatever we do in terms of encouraging desert planting and protecting the pollinators of all kinds, and which means protecting our food sources as well, and also our water and soil. It's an enormously and indeed profound issue. So why do we continue to tolerate this? And if it is not used by the city, anybody can go to even the grocery store and buy these dangerous products. I have a few photos that were just taken in the last couple of weeks here in Palm Springs where workers who are not protected, ground crews, yard crews, are out dosing like you would water your lawn, and they're just spraying. And it's in these locations, it's desert landscaping, and there's weeds that crop up between the rocks and so on. So they're spraying it quite liberally, and even. The fact that it's available in grocery stores is quite shocking to me. If you can't put it on your skin, and if you can't drink it, it's poison, and these are deadly poisons that actually make DDT look pretty insignificant in comparison. The producers of these companies, which is not limited to Monsanto, now Bayer, this is very lucrative for them, and they have no desire, so we can't look at them to be responsible. But we can take the responsibility in our own community. There are other states and other towns, not just Malibu. That was recent. That was at the end of December of last year. So I think it's upon us to protect our environment, our children, our women of childbearing years. It's extremely dangerous for young children and also for small animals. That these chemicals hover when the temperature's under 75 degrees, it's going to be about 25 inches off the ground. As the temperature warms up over 75 degrees, that expands, and those chemicals affect all of us. So they're extremely dangerous, and this is something that I am very concerned about. It's personally impacted my life, and I wouldn't want that to happen to anybody. It's not going to go away, and I think the onus is on us to take responsibility to protect our children and our environment and our pets and the small animals, because it's all part of the same chain as Malibu saw.
So the scope still isn't clear to me. There seems to be a lot of chemicals involved, and how we would get our arms around that is not clear. I think we have some other comments. Commissioner Gauthier?
My question was regarding the Coastal Commission's boundaries. I don't believe that those boundaries extend into Riverside County at all. So there would be no current legislation that would apply to our county in relation to this issue.
Well, I'm just reading, with all due respect, I'm reading the link to the materials. It says that there is explicit the link in there, I just clicked on it and pulled it up here for the article. It says that the state, there's explicit preemption of the state. So while, I agree with everything that Commissioner Garrett has just said, before we go further on this, I perhaps Manager Tellerico can check with the city attorney, because to me, it seems exceedingly clear that the state has signed on with a whole bunch of other states with the business-sponsored American Legislative Exchange Council is well-known in circles. I won't make any particular comment, but is well-known in drafting business-friendly legislation, and it looks like they got this through in California. So I do not see any authority, at least based on what's in this article that's linked to. I do not see any authority for the city of Palm Springs to regulate this. Perhaps work, with our state assemblyman or member and state senator to amend the law, because I'm surprised that exists in California. But I don't think that we can actually do anything about this. At least that's my reading of the materials.
Commissioner Coffey?
There are numerous examples of cities in California that have taken major steps to eliminating the use of glyphosates in their communities. And for example, Thousand Oaks has stopped allowing it to be used on golf courses and in any of their public parks and playgrounds. Irvine has, Burbank has. There's examples of cities that are not in the coastal zone and don't fall under the Coastal Commission's jurisdiction that have taken big steps towards eliminating the use of these pesticides in their communities. And it's not an out-and-out ban on the sale and all of that, but I think that there are some major steps that we can take as this issue works itself through the state and multiple states.
And are those efforts focused on city operations, or are similar to what we decided, or is it broader than that? And does it just focus on the one?
Well, it's included in some instances school districts and others. So there's, friends of the city that where children play and pets play and insects live.
Right.
Commissioner Baker?
Excuse me. I echo Commissioner Friedman's concerns regarding jurisdiction. Cities have the right to organize themselves into, we've already outlawed it for city use. School districts are a step away from being the city, and it's easier for a school district to do it. But the question becomes whether we can control what a homeowner does in purchasing dangerous chemicals. Even if we were to ban it in Palm Springs, that's not to say a homeowner couldn't go to Cathedral City or Desert Hot Springs and make the same purchase and use it on his or her own property. That also is not to say that a commercial landscaper who lives in another city purchases this chemical somewhere else and drives from city to city using it. So then we run into the force of enforcement, which is absolutely impossible. You have no idea what someone is squirting on their yard or what some landscape organization is squirting out. So while I completely agree with Commissioner Garnett, the enforcement and the jurisdiction are huge problems for us.
I think the comparison to some counties, certainly not in our area, that are dry and don't allow the sale and distribution of any sort of alcohol, I think is similar to what we're looking at here. It doesn't mean that people aren't going to bring it in from another county or have it at home or bring it over state lines, but the fact is that it can't be sold and distributed in those counties. And I don't think that they have a right to continue to poison us. It's greed-driven, and I don't think that it's okay. It certainly is not okay to be poisoning the environment and people and all of the animals. It's not okay.
I think we all would agree with the problem. It's just a matter of what the solution is and how it can be implemented. And certainly we've dealt with other bans. We've dealt with a leaf blower ban in the past where we had to have public hearings and input from the users. We would have some of the same users with chemicals. We're talking about plastics bans a plastics ban as well, where we would have to have input from the public and so forth. So that's part of the process. Was there a comment over here?
Yes, I think it's worth at least having a conversation about it because it will educate everyone. So it would make a strong statement if we could get them out of our local stores in Palm Springs. At Lowe's, I couldn't even find a glyphosate-free herbicide. I had to go to across the street to Home Depot. And so, we can also influence, what products they're using and selling. And if we couldn't do a total ban, maybe we could have a big display of the, glyphosate-free and, educate our community members that this is better for everyone. So it could definitely be.
I would support education, and if Manager Tallarico can check with the city attorney's office and report back to us next month. I don't think we can put a ban, but I agree that anything short of a ban, i.e. education, encouraging that the large garden supply stores stock, alternatives and do the education just so we've done education. I think those are the things that we can absolutely do without sort of stepping on the state requirement. So I agree with everything that Commissioner Garrett has said, but I am concerned that the state seems to have preempted an outright ban. So we can see what we can do outside of that ban.
It would be great if we could lead the way and ban completely. But if not, maybe even have a warning label like they do on cigarettes that, this is going to cause cancer, this is going to kill our pollinators or something, and have a big display saying this is safe. This is good for, I don't know, it could work.
Commissioner Baker?
Again, these are questions for the state legislature to decide. The city itself can't tell a manufacturer what content to post on the outside, on the exterior of packaging. They're great ideas, but I'm just saying the functionality of all of this really lies with the state if we want to be effective. We could have a resolution from the city to the state that sends a clear message, and that's something that's actually achievable.
Yeah, especially given that the state did in 2017 list glyphosate as a carcinogen, and the county of LA has done a moratorium on the use of Roundup.
Also just recently, in the past month, I believe, been banned for use in the EU. The GMOs, which were developed by Monsanto originally, were already banned in the EU and Mexico, and it's a long-going fight. They continue to resist it, but just now the EU has rejected these poisons. And I don't want to just refer to it as Roundup because it's an entire classification. And the nature of these companies, they're very, very sneaky. And they can tweak it, they can change it. And if you watch their advertising, they're usually animated. They look very friendly, like something you'd show a 7-year-old child. And, you'd think it was mother's milk. And it's not. So I don't think it's going to come from the companies. In fact, they're countering that with a lot of their propaganda. But these companies are literal merchants of death, and we need to regard them in that way. These are not cleaning products. They're poisons. They're deadly poisons.
Are there any other comments? So we've had a couple of suggestions. One is that we start an educational campaign within the city, and another is to have this. I guess it would be to have the city council make a resolution to the state about a possible ban. So how do we proceed? Do we need to? I think the suggestion was made, Patrick, that we need to talk to the city attorney about an educational campaign?
Well, no. Want to confirm the jurisdictional issue that
okay.
Commissioner Friedman raised, and so I will do that. And I don't know that an educational campaign would be illegal, but
no, okay.
But we could. I'll ask them that too. But yeah.
So I just want to be sure that the jurisdictional question, so it's clear that probably a ban wouldn't fly, but will you be talking to the city attorney about what other things are possible, given it, other than a full ban. Okay, yeah.
Like educational or a resolution.
Maybe? Like cigarettes?
Also, I'd like to point out that there are some new advances in weeding other than the old type of long prong where you can, like kind of like a barbecue fork where the worker can stand and dig it up. There are now new advances that are used for commercial agriculture, particularly organic, that is being adapted for home use. The same type of robots that go around your house vacuuming are weeders. They stand a little bit taller, so they're able to cross over rocks and that, and you let them loose, and they dig up the weeds. No poisons, and no labor is involved except for the maintenance of the weeding robots.
Thank you. Okay, so the next step then will be that Patrick will talk to the city attorney about the jurisdictional issue and what other things are possible and report back to us at the meeting in March. If there aren't any other comments, then we can move on to...
Just one more about the weeding robots, and this is very much the future of labor. Imagine what that could mean for an entrepreneur in this area where they were doing a poison-free and friendly labor where then their labor can be used for actual gardening and not doing backbreaking tasks like digging up weeds from between rocks. So it could be an incredible idea for an entrepreneur here in the desert.
Thank you. So now we'll move on to subcommittee and commissioner reports. And the first one is the Standing Committee on Solar and Green Building.
In the spirit of our discussion on keeping reports short, I will try to do this in a New York minute, and there is a lengthy report that you have for further information. Solar policy from 2018 was repealed because it's now preempted by the state rules, and there's an update for the materials on the website. Patrick's working with the building department on that, and that will reflect the new rules. There also needs to be an update on the same materials for EV chargers because of AB 1236. So in my spare time, I will try to get to some updated language on that. And what I was able to do was to slip into the Planning Commission zoning code update that they approved at their meeting last Wednesday, a couple of provisions on best practices for zoning. So that went from concept to Planning Commission approval in 2 weeks, and will go on the, supposed to go on the council agenda for March 12th, according to Planning Director Flagg. You recall that the commission approved the $10,000 home energy assessment pilot project rebate, and Patrick's working on that, and hopefully that will get launched in the next few weeks. And then finally, I do have an update on the draft ordinance on renewable energy tied to the DCE launch. I received over the weekend, and Patrick's seen it as well, some cost analysis. Patrick and I will be speaking with CVAG in the next couple of days. As noted in the report, the ordinance will be revised to reflect building energy use and not size. That's actually the data that we received, which is quite helpful, and hopefully have something at least for discussion at the commission, but because it's also referred to in the roadmap for council input, I think it would just be a discussion, and perhaps it can be attached, and if it's done in sufficient time, we can get it attached to the staff report for the council meetings, just so they can take a look at it. And that's my New York Minute Green Building Solar Report.
Thank you. The next is Standing Subcommittee on Waste Reduction.
All right, I will be quick as well. There's lots of detail in the staff report. Wanted to quickly follow up on the flushable wipes conversation that we had last month. So we did become a member of that organization that we discussed last time, NASC, I think, and have been getting actually some really interesting information from them as a result of that membership. And so then the feedback that Commissioner Miller got on any additional outreach in terms of like a letter from council or anything like that was to hold off on that for a little while. So they'll let us know when they want that sort of input, and they will probably give us a draft letter or something, a template for us to circulate to council. So more on that later. And then the only other thing I wanted to call your attention to was this. There is going to be a study session, and I don't think it was discussed yet in terms of the timing of that, on the capital improvements study for the wastewater treatment plant. So that discussion will have to do with what additional changes that they want to make to the wastewater treatment plant in the next 15 years or so. So it's very forward-looking, looking at big changes, little changes, all kinds of different things, some of which impact the effluent from that wastewater treatment plant. Some of it would affect the emissions, the air emissions from that plant. So there's a lot that could be contained in that. So we'll be keeping you posted on the developments related to that. So that's it.
Thank you. The next is the Standing Subcommittee on World Environment Day.
Well, we're making some progress in our plans for June 7th, which is the first Sunday of June. And there's just so much about climate change right now. So I think that our local theme, we won't know the international theme for probably a few months. They're typically very slow at announcing that.
The word is, even though it doesn't come out officially, is last year China hosted, and it was clean air, which is sort of funny. But for this year, the host city is Melbourne, Australia, and the theme will be pollinators.
Oh, okay. Well, and that's our kind of sub-theme as well. So we've also chosen youth voice and our sustainable future. So if any of you know any youth activists that would love to participate, we're putting together a youth advisory committee as well, so that they can really take ownership of this event as well and help participate. And we have two MCs who both have an interest in the environment. So I think it'll be nice to have some young people at the mic. And we had 3 billboards last year, and we've decided to do just 2 this year and use that other money to purchase banners for Palm Canyon Highway 111. So I believe at Alejo Street, it's been reserved for us for the week at the end of June and the first week of June. So that will be nice because that's across Palm Canyon. And then if we buy at least 6 of the what are they called? The castle banners, the ones on the sides, they're double-sided. If you buy at least 6 of them, they're about $200 plus tax. For 6. For one alone, it's $250. But it'd be nice to have them balanced and have them, have. So we'll be working on our budget and just seeing how many we can actually feasibly purchase. It will be a little bit more initially. We're waiting back for a quote from Canyon Printing, but the first quote that we got back was for the street banner. It's $2,565. So
That goes all the way.
Mm-hmm. But if we say it's the first Sunday of June, and we've had it the first Sunday of June for the last 5 years, and we, working with the city, if we just make that our day, and if they can give us, commitment that the pavilion will be ours that first Sunday, then I think it's worth the investment, because then we won't have to buy it again. It's not like the billboards or anything else. And we've also decided with the billboards to, request to have those back so that we can get them recycled into making bags and then, sell those for the future and keep getting back more money to invest into our event. So we'll keep you posted, and we won't be ordering those right away. Let's see. We will not be sponsoring the art contest this year, our commission. So the Environmental Education Collaborative that I'm a secretary for is covering that. So that's an extra $350 that we can put back into our pool. And we decided to give a little bit of money to the chefs that will be demoing and giving their time typically they've just volunteered their time and we've provided farm fresh produce for them to, create, mastery things with, to show people how good farm to table fresh food can be. So that will be nice just to offer that to them. And we're also, I guess we've decided to allow vendors. I don't think that there's any loopholes in that, but we just won't be able to use the peach jar, which is for the school advertising. We were able to send emails to all the families for 25 schools that we chose, but typically that hasn't brought back the return of, attendees. So it's better to work with businesses. So if you know of any green businesses that would like to have, anything that they want to sell, that will be a little bit more for an exhibitor table if they're going to be, profiting from it. But hopefully we'll get buy-in from those businesses to also help us promote, and we'll do smaller posters that can go up into the windows of businesses all over town. And, we can extend this out of Palm Springs as well. So it's really a Coachella Valley thing. However, the committee has decided to change the name from Coachella Valley Celebrates World Environment Day to Palm Springs World Environment Day. And we have a website that Dan got right away. So that's already up and running. And so we can put that on our banner as well, the website, and also Your Sustainable City. So that will get more recognition for us. And we're talking about having some workshops. So we haven't done that in the past. It's been an interesting idea before, but there are classrooms on the other side in the leisure center. So, some of the topics that we were talking about is recycling, composting, food waste reduction, and energy efficiency. And for the raffle, we're hoping to have a compost bin and some other things. So we thought that if everyone gets a raffle ticket at the door, they can put into the pool in front of whatever it is that they would like to get as the raffle prize, so that somebody that doesn't want to do composting is not going to get a compost bin. I don't know, am I missing anything?
Oh.
Yeah.
To get a press release out to the magazines, and I'm also thinking Sunset Magazine, we would have to get that out to them by the end of the first week in April to make sure.
Enough time.
But I think we could bring in more people from San Diego
Sure.
and so on into it, but it doesn't cost anything really. It's just, and maybe it can be pulled from the website, but it's a matter of us actually getting it to the magazines in time so we can get the benefit of more people coming.
Sure.
Also, update, Greta Thunberg is now, looks like, going to be nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize, so she's a busy young lady. We haven't had any commitment as yet, but I'm still working on that. And even though they've been clients in the past, both Lily Tomlin and Jane Fonda, who are extremely active with their environmental rallies these days, have changed agencies and management. So I'm trying some backdoor moves to reach them because it's oftentimes hard to get past the secretary. So just doing her job. But those are still happening, and it could be tremendous if we can get one or both of them to come and speak and maybe lead a rally. So we're working on it.
That's amazing, Sandra. With the Facebook page, I did a save the date. I haven't been able to change the name from CVC Wed, and I don't know if, I don't know who to even ask if anyone has better Facebook skills than I do, but I may have to create a new page that's Palm Springs World Environment Day, which is kind of a shame because we do have some followers that are looking to that other page for notification, but I'll keep you posted on that. That's it, I think.
And Dan asked a good question. Did we approve the budget for this? Or did we?
I was going to bring it up,
Yeah.
too. I don't think we have.
Okay.
And we generally do probably about this time of the year.
Right.
So.
Well, how about for the next
Sure.
meeting, we'll come with a budget, a better estimation, and, things are reevaluated, things that we're not spending money on that we can reallocate, and hopefully it will be a little bit more accurate than, just throwing a number out there right this moment.
Okay. That sounds good. Thank you. Next item is the Ad hoc Subcommittee on Earth Day. Commissioner Baker.
So we are going forward with our, well, there's sort of two prongs. The city has planned certain things, and then just in the last 10 days, a private citizen has sort of taken a lot of this onto his own without any official backing or even use of locations and things. So right now, there's a little, I don't know, Patrick, do you have any?
So the only thing that I know is that there has been an event posted on the Earth Day 2020 website that is going to be at the Wellwood Murray Library steps at 5:30 on the 22nd, which is basically the same time that we have our event at the Cultural Center. So there's that, and I have not heard. I think the Mayor Kors did say that he has a conflict, and so he would only be available at 5 o'clock for whatever. So anyway, I think the details for that event are to be determined. So yeah, so. And then the only other thing I'll add is that I did have a meeting of the 1PS, some reps from 1PS to talk a little bit more about the neighborhood challenge. They had a lot of good input, and so I'm going to be revising that list of activities and things for neighborhoods to do and get that back out to them and have further conversations about that.
So, and then the Green Citizen Award is now posted. We have two, there's one for student and adult, and it's posted on the city website. And I've seen stuff on that going out already. So that's one of the things we're planning for that event as well.
Yep. And I have gotten one response so far for a student nominee. So please get the word out and let people know that it's out there. And
we asked that nominee to call Jen.
What's that? The nominee? Oh, I don't know if you can or not. I'm not sure that I can reveal the details of that till April.
Okay.
So, yes.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Baker. The next subcommittee is walkability and pedestrian planning.
So I do have a very brief update. The firm that has been selected to do our master plan made it through the audit phase, finally, 2 months later, 3 months later. And so they're moving on to the negotiation phase. So I have no idea how long that will take. But our fingers are crossed that they will be on board by middle of March so that we can have them at our table for the 1PS picnic. So we'll see.
Is there still a firm end to this process?
in terms of bringing on the consultant or the whole process?
The whole process. Is that moving out as well?
So I did ask them about the end date, which we thought was pretty firm, but they said that we actually have another year after what we thought was the end date. So it can slide a little bit. I don't think that we want it to take necessarily more than a year, but and I think that's still the schedule, but just when it starts, I think can shift a little bit. So.
Is there any way to do a two-part process? I mean, the city's spending an awful lot of money on street improvements that every other city in Coachella Valley is ripping out because we know them to be a bad idea.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, do we have to wait another year and a half and keep installing push-to-walk buttons and bad crosswalks and inferior, all these other bad things that Rancho Mirage and Palm Desert are all ripping out? Or?
So I don't think that we necessarily have to do that. The part of the proposal was most of the proposals that we received had some sort of an immediate action sort of component and a longer term planning component. So I think what comes out of this will be an identification of some more immediate things that we could do versus longer term stuff that we need to plan for and budget for. So yeah.
It's very frustrating.
Yeah.
What we're doing.
I know. I keep my senses are heightened for that recently, and I just observe all these people making awkward moves at crosswalks.
Well,
So
that and the stuff that you see that's going in, even in El Paseo, is so far ahead of what we're doing now. It's embarrassing. They're putting a whole walkability plan in. They've changed all
Microphone.
their access to
microphone.
pedestrians. crosswalks. They do walk ahead buttons where you push where the lights turn green for the pedestrians before the lights turn for the cars. So it allows people to get out in pedestrian crosswalks. I mean, there's a ton of things that are common practice that they're doing that we're doing quite the opposite in.
And the next item is the ad hoc subcommittee on crosswalks and pedestrian safety, which involves 1PS as well, and that's really dependent upon the start of the consultant and the outreach program, so we'll be reporting on that as time goes on. And then the ad hoc subcommittee on bicycle routes and cycling, Commissioner Flanagan.
I can read what I sent you. Is that?
Let me start. I'll give a little bit of an introduction. If I can find it. A couple of weeks ago, Commissioner Middleton sent an email to Kathy Crone, Denise Goolsby, and myself, basically representing 1PS.
Councilmember Middleton?
Did I say, oh, council member, I'm sorry, not commissioner. I hope she didn't hear that. Thinking of commissioners, okay. And basically she said she was debating whether to ask the staff and city council to review our existing streets that have designated bike lanes. And basically she was asking for input on whether we should not do anything about looking at bike lanes, do a few targeted street reviews, do a broad city review, or something else. And so I replied to her right away that this is probably more under the auspices of the Sustainability Commission because we have our ad hoc subcommittee on bicycles. And then I contacted Commissioner Flanagan to make some comments on that, which we will then forward back to Council Member Middleton. So, Commissioner Flanagan.
Okay, so I kind of looked back at our last agenda items from our bikes committee. We kind of surveyed the group and we came up with a couple that were still outstanding, and I summarized them in bullet points and sent them back to Chair for review. And one of them is still outstanding is the bike safety at the intersection of Bilardo and South Palm. And I understand that there's some traffic changes that are pending, so we're going to wait to see what happens with that, but it's still an issue. Another one is the connection of the existing bike trails to CV Link. There's a bunch of half-done stuff that come through Mesquite and Bel Air Golf Course, and those areas are open, I understand, for being redeveloped as open space, so I think that's something to keep our eye on. I'd like to connect that. There's talk, and there's a lot of interest with establishing a bike lane on South Palm, either from Bilardo or Laverne up to Indian Canyons. There's a lot of bike traffic, and there's a lot of 50-foot wide single lane traffic where it's unclear where you drive at. Some bike lanes would clarify that a bunch. And then the final one is the bike racks and signage at Talkeets Plaza. We were going to put them in, and then the developer put in a bunch of inferior, low-quality ones that are broken and falling over. They need to be, I guess we need to kind of pick that back up. So those are the 4 things I sent to you as bullet items that I was hoping we could forward on to Council Member Middleton.
And that's the plan. I will, basically the response is that we would do a few targeted street reviews rather than an overall city review. And I will reply to her with the comments that you made. Does anybody have any comments? Is it consensus that we should do that?
One area that may need review is Alejo because of the arena, and I recall from the arena discussions that Alejo would be widened, but I fear that there isn't an awful lot of room, and there's the neighbors on the north side of Alejo, and I guess movie colony neighborhood. So hopefully the bike lanes will not be sacrificed, but that may require a lot of surgical work with the engineering folks to make sure that there's room for bikes along with whatever other widening they're planning.
So impacts of the arena. On Alejo, yeah.
We can add that. That's a good suggestion.
That would be a great thing to include in the general plan discussion too.
Yes.
Also, I think that the bike route on San Rafael is one that I would flag as something to look at, just because since they went in and those car traffic lanes were reduced to one lane, a lot of people are passing slower cars in the car lane using the bike lane, and it's just extremely dangerous. And they've really picked up construction now in Miralon, where 1,200 homes are going to go in, and really increase the number of cars on that street. So people are ignoring the bike lanes on that road and using them as passing lanes.
I've experienced that. I drive that street a lot. So,
It also happens on Farrell quite a bit. But I think the trouble is that the bike traffic on these bike lanes is very low. And so that's why people are tempted to do this. There's just no incentive not to.
so perhaps we can add San Rafael to the list.
So did I hear on San Rafael, or look at enforcement levels at areas that are changing? Because I heard, I'm not familiar with San Rafael, so
Yeah.
I can't.
And that may be more.
San Rafael runs between Indian Canyon and Sunrise.
Okay.
So
Out in the north end of the city.
Right.
Yeah.
I just think that looking at it should also include, is there a safer street to put it on adjacent to it? Because,
Yeah, well, it sounds like if traffic loads have changed too, it's something to look at, if they're going to.
well, they're going to
going to
change
change,
drastically. But it's a major commute route for people coming in from DHS down Indian Canyon, and then they shoot over to Farrell, the Farrell Freeway.
So we could add that, and I see it as an enforcement issue, and maybe make that emphasis.
Yeah, maybe that would be a
Okay.
way to do it, so.
Okay. The speed limit there is 50, and I've had people pass me when I was doing 45.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yes.
Part of that, I think a lot of where there's road diets, a lot of people were exceeding the speed limits often, and they lost that ability to exceed the speed limit. So it's almost an enforcement tool. It's,
And-
so it's something to look at, whether is it an enforcement problem or is it?
I agree it's an
traffic
enforcement
flow
problem, but it's also a big traffic problem waiting to happen once Miralon is built, and all those cars are coming out onto that street.
So it could also be brought up to the Code Enforcement and Public Works Committee as well. I can do that. And it was definitely a road diet. That was the change that was made less than 2 years ago.
So maybe I mean, there are a lot of big new developments going on all around town, which they're all surrounded by various bike paths. So maybe the overall picture is to look at the impact of new development on existing bike paths.
We can add that emphasis.
I.e. San Rafael and Maryland.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Then the next item is ad hoc subcommittee on night sky, and we have some charts to see.
Thank you, Dan. So yeah, we're working on coming up with a lighting ordinance for the city of Palm Springs. And what I'm going to talk to you tonight, just briefly about, is a couple of sources. This model lighting ordinance that the IDSA and the Illuminating Engineering Society of North America put together about 8 years ago now. And I've put information there together with the ordinance from the city of Tucson, which is pretty progressive on this because they try to keep the sky as dark as they can for Kitt Peak National Observatory. Okay, next. Here's a graphic of our problem. We have, if you see the arrow there that says Palm Springs in the Coachella Valley, that is, yeah, thanks, Dan. That's the sky glow that's coming out of the Coachella Valley right now from a vantage point up in Joshua Tree. So it's pretty bad. And as I've mentioned it at several previous meetings, if you want a demonstration of it, just go out on the next cloudy night and take a look at the clouds up in the sky. And they're a ruddy, horrible red color. And that's all sky glow that's going up and then getting reflected back down. So next,
Red color or white color?
well, it's kind of a ruddy orange.
Reflected white
Yeah,
underneath.
but it's really, it's not a white that gets reflected back down. And the clouds look quite yellow. So the goal of this ordinance would be to reclaim and sustain our night skies with, and we can quantify this. We can say that we'd like to restore visibility to magnitude 4.0, and that is items up in the sky like like the Milky Way itself. It's a 4.0 object, so it'd be nice to be able to see it again. And if we could see it, then we would know that we had met our goal. For just some comparison, if you look at Venus in the night sky right now, before it sets in the west, it's a magnitude of about minus 4.0. So it's a pretty ambitious goal. And why do we want to do this? We've also mentioned this several times in previous meetings. We want to do it to preserve this as a natural resource. We are the Sustainability Commission after all, but also we had a meeting last fall with some representatives from Joshua Tree, and the numbers that they had were kind of stunning. They said that there is an enormous market for people to go to dark sky sites and just hang out at them. And Joshua Tree is maxed out right now because of that. The campsites up there are overflowing. They're full. They cannot sustain and take the numbers of people that want to go up there for the dark skies. Well, that's an opportunity for us, because if we could recover ours, then we could make a play for that market and enhance our ecotourism reputation. Next. So there is a current Palm Springs Municipal Code section on outdoor lighting standards, and the words are all good in it. See, the regulations intended to maintain lighting levels as low as possible, to enhance our community character, whatever that means, and charm. Did I say charm? Okay, that's an incorrect. And maintain at least dark skies. Well, I guess it's true. It's community character and charm, and maintain dark skies. Yeah.
We have lots of charming characters.
So here's an example of a guideline from the current standards. Section A, pole-mounted and wall-mounted lighting fixtures used for area lighting and security lighting shall be full cutoff luminaries. That's really important. Full cutoff, as you can see below, simply means that they're shielded so that none of the light from the fixture is traveling up. It's all traveling either down or sideways. That's essentially what it means. Okay, next. And simply by the fact that you can see when you look up at this ruddy, horrible, cloudy skies, and the fact that we can't see the Milky Way in our city, it's not working. And why isn't it working? Well, here's 3 reasons. There are interesting exceptions in it. Like the post-top lamp luminaries, do you know what I'm talking about? In many HOAs, you've got a post and then you've got a bulb on top that just spills light everywhere.
Lollipop lamps.
The lollipop
Yeah,
lamps.
lollipop.
We got so many lollipop lamps. And notice what they say about them. If they have lumens of less than 6,000, for comparison, a 100-watt bulb is 1,500 lumens, so this is many hundreds of watt bulbs that we're talking about. Then they get exempted. They don't have to be cut off. And this thing about this direct view, it doesn't make much sense to me. They get exempted if you can't look directly at them and have your eyes blown out, I guess. But that doesn't do anything for the light that's spilling up into the sky. Another exception, the following is not subject to the provision all outdoor lights fixtures that are existing and legally installed prior to when these guidelines came in. That's probably why we have so many of that kind of lighting fixture at the HOAs. They were all installed years ago. There's limitations on it. So lighting used to highlight landscape and building facades and fountains. So this is the kind of lighting that you see all over town now to illuminate plants and vegetation and palm trees, this uplighting. The language says that's acceptable and shall be adjusted and aimed during the night to ensure light is focused on the designated object. Well, that's impossible, because if you're an uplight that's trying to illuminate a 60-foot palm tree, you're not illuminating just the palm tree, you're sending the light up into space. And then the third problem with it is, of course, lack of oversight and enforcement. One of the stipulations in it is that lighting luminaries intended to be directional shall be furnished with total lamp lumens of less than 4,000. Again, that's a 200 or 300 watt light bulb. I invite you all to take a look along Talkeets Canyon the next time you're driving along at night at the intensity of the lights that are uplighting the palm trees along there. It's exceeding these limits by a large amount, and the city has installed those. So we have all three problems. Next. So what does the ordinance need? What do we need to block these loopholes and to accomplish our goal? What I did was I basically looked at these two, a model lighting ordinance by these organizations and then the Tucson ordinance. What did they have in common? What did it jump out at me that it looks like, because both of them are doing it, it's probably a really good idea. This was the first one, is that the ordinance, we should designate at least 4 different lighting zone areas. And they would go from the darkest areas out just outside of town, like an Oswego Canyon, and then they would get progressively closer to the highest lit areas where we do have to have outdoor lighting at night, like the downtown business corridor and that sort of thing. So that would be the first step in one of these ordinances. Then go ahead, Dan. And this is just an example of how we would use those designated areas then to get to our goal. This is just a table that shows what the model light ordinance suggests for the number of lumens for an outdoor light fixture in each of these areas. And you'll see that they, for example, LZ2, which would be kind of your malls and that sort of thing, not quite the downtown area, but not quite a residential area too. And the requirement that they suggest there is that you would have a maximum of 1,050 lumens for a light fixture in those areas. So I think this is doable. I think it's pretty straightforward, and it would be a good road for us to go down. Next. And then the third thing that I think we have is to establish curfews in our lights. We're not going to ban completely, if we follow these guidelines, the uplighting of people's foliage, but we would be reducing its intensity by quite a bit. But let's get rid of it entirely at some point during the night simply by imposing a curfew on them. If you want to uplight your palm trees around your house, good on you. But we're going to require you to shut them off at 11 p.m. So that's what I've got so far. I guess the next step, Patrick, is probably to turn this into a position paper like we've done before and get it to city employees and city council.
Yeah, so this strikes me as a perfect fit for the master plan, the general plan update, because a lot of these things are zoning issues.
Yes.
And so those are the kinds of things that would be presented through that sort of a plan. But I do agree that it's worth highlighting for council that this is an issue and it's something that we should be paying attention to. So I think that's the way we do that, is do the paper and figure out how to get it on some sort of council agenda for discussion at least, and then go forward from there.
Yeah, I think they should know about the economic side of it too.
Yeah.
They should know about what the incentive is economically. It's not just for, weirdo astronomers who want to look up at the night sky in Palm Springs. John?
So the Business Retention Subcommittee should also hear about this too, if they haven't already.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the more that people can install these fully shaded lights already, both in residents and businesses, it's really good. Greg, when I hear about these new developments going in with that many number of places, it just chills me, because if you take a look at the Enclave, if anybody's been along Barristo lately, that's the new one on the north side of Barristo. You can already see it. They're already putting these uplights to illuminate the bushes that they've installed in the front of it, and a new complex with over 1,000. It's just going to be horrendous.
If we do a position paper, I think the thing that we've grappled with in talking with John McCoy and a couple of us is that it's a rather detailed ordinance to have to write, but if we present a position paper to the city council, would they help get someone to put together an ordinance to write, or would that be something that the
Well, they would direct the city to do that, and then we would
Staff-
figure
staff
out
could
how
help
it
with
would,
writing.
how it
Okay.
would be done.
And that's what happened with the leaf blower
Yeah,
ban.
and
We-
same thing with the plastics ban.
And the same
So
with the
we-
plastic ban.
We
Right.
basically, you put together a position paper, the commission votes on it, then I put together a staff report that goes to council that says, hey, the commission has suggested this, and we'd like your input and direction.
Yeah, I think that we can start kind of from the top level, and we can point out the economics, and we can point out these approaches, and then the details and the weeds get into when the city starts to.
Right. I think
Yeah.
this is great, seeing, well, we have something, and bringing 4 or 5 things to light, like, oh, yeah, this is obviously out of whack, or old, or not well. So.
One of the things I would suggest is that you contact that group that you told me about, that does the periodic sky viewings out
Actually,
at.
I was just about to say that. I
Yeah.
have this up on my calendar. This weekend, there's a Dark Sky Festival.
Right.
Dark Sky Festivals occur in 29 Palms. I went to one up in Amboy and Mojave a couple months ago, and this one is through the nerds at NASA, ex-NASA
Right.
people,
Right.
which
Yeah.
is but
Yeah.
it's in Death Valley Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and what happens is you get a bunch of people get together, and a lot of us home astronomers will set all their telescopes up late at night, and it's a super fun way to kind of get involved.
Well, and I was there about a month ago or 2 months ago, I can't remember. And we got there at 5:30, I think, which is when it was supposed to start. We couldn't even stay because there were so many people.
The Amboy Mojave one?
No,
2
the
months ago, or
one, the
29
one
Palms?
at 21
Yeah.
29
Oh, yeah.
Palms. I mean, it was incredible.
Right,
So,
the turnout of these are,
Yeah.
a lot of people go to these, and the national parks do a lot of this.
and it wasn't
so.
even that great, I have to say.
Not that great.
I mean, really, because we just went through Monument Valley, a few months ago when we did the move out, and it was nothing like that. So, it's to your point about how much light pollution creep there is in that area in particular.
Yeah. Oh, they're very concerned about
Yeah.
it up there.
Yeah.
So I'll just make one more point. You saw the sky glow problem. It's Coachella Valley wide. It's not just Palm Springs, which is not to say that we shouldn't take the lead on getting an ordinance, but we've got to start to go through CVAG on this.
Yeah.
Because the other cities need to come on board with it too.
Rancho Mirage has done some things, and they have a staff astronomer in Rancho Mirage, and they also have an observatory, so.
Yeah.
So can we set a target for having a draft of the position paper?
Yeah. I'm just wondering whether it should be next month or the month after. Let's go for next month.
Okay. We'll get you on the agenda. Thank you. The next item is water conservation.
Okay, couple of things from this morning's DWA board meeting. First is that directors approved a submission for a $75,000 grant from the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation for turf removal, and this is a grant where they're likely to get. They're still waiting to hear back from their request for Prop 1 grant money, and that would include funding for the airport projects that Patrick mentioned earlier. And Ashley Metzger attended last week's 1PS meeting and mentioned that there's still rebate funds available for turf removal and other water conservation projects. More information on that is on the DWA website. Water conservation continues to be good. In January, there was a 20% reduction from the 2013 baseline, and cumulative savings of the last 12-month period is 19.8 months, and since June of 2016 is 17.4%. Also, after many years, DWA has finally convinced the State Department of Water Resources to include the seasonal population and not just permanent residents in the population figures used to calculate daily per capita water use, because they assumed that there were roughly, 50,000 people in the DWA service area, and it's 2 to 3 times that based on the visitors. So that will affect the reporting going forward.
Thank you. The next item is wellness.
So we're looking into what's known as the 3-4-50 campaign, standing for 3 habits that people have: smoking, tobacco, diet, and lack of exercise leads to cardiovascular disease, cancer, respiratory disease, and diabetes, which cause 50% of deaths in humans. There's a whole group behind this I'm trying to reach out to. So it's basically a public information campaign. Obviously, the city can't force anything on anyone on this, but it's just raising the awareness of how 50% of deaths are preventable through just healthier living. So that would ideally be something that we could post on the website. I don't know if it anything concrete that we could add to like any event, but there's a group behind us, so I'm working with them to see what their suggestions are.
Okay, great. So you report as you get more information. Thank you. Finally, Desert Community Energy.
Okay, me again. All right, as Patrick mentioned, we're moving quickly towards the launch in April of DCE. At the board meeting last week, the DCE board members approved, established the Palm Springs Working Group to focus on Palm Springs-specific activities related to the launch. Our first meeting is this Thursday. Initially, it will be the 5 members from Palm Springs, which is Commissioner Baker, Commissioner Goins, Commissioner Miller, and myself, and O'Loughlin, and I'm working with Mayor Kors to expand the working group to include other community representatives, and we just met right before this meeting. There are 3 community meetings to provide more information on DCE. They're all from 5:30 to 7:30. First one is March 9th in City Hall Council Chambers, then March 11th at the James O. Jesse Desert Highland Unity Center Gymnasium, and finally March 17th, which is the night of our commission meeting, at the Demuth Community Center Multi-Purpose Room. Finally, Lift to Rise is doing a lot of community outreach to enroll people in the various utility discount programs, which provide discounts for up to 30% on energy bills. There are approximately 6,000 customers in Palm Springs already enrolled, and an estimated 800 additional customers that are eligible to participate but not yet enrolled. And based on direction given by the Palm Springs City Council and then reflected by the DCE board, last week, all of the enrollees in these discount programs will receive 100% carbon-free energy at a cost that's slightly lower than what they're paying SCE. Commissioner Miller is actively working with Live to Rise on a lot of these outreach events, so I wanted to thank her for all of her activities in that area.
Thank you. And finally, the last item on the agenda is,
One point on that.
okay, sure.
So Southern Cal Edison just sent out a notice for community hearing on their rate increases. Are we somehow be able to tie that in to our launch?
So the rates were set basically last week, and they're based on SE's rates that were just approved as of January. So these rates are set for essentially for the rest of this year. But each year there will be at the beginning of the year there will be a rate setting that will be benchmarked against SCE's rates.
Thank you. The final item is commissioner comments and upcoming agenda development. We'll go around the table, and in the spirit of being efficient and ending the meeting soon, please keep your comments brief. Vice Chair McCann.
No comments.
I have a long list of 5 comments, but I'll hold on to them until later. Thanks.
Thank you.
No comment.
Commissioner Goins.
Sorry about this. We've had a couple of mentions this evening on the general plan update, and Commissioner Goins is the Sustainability Commission representative to the General Plan Steering Committee, so I actually would like an agenda item that's specifically focused on that and sort of the role of the commission and the link between the sustainability plan and the general plan, because I want to make sure that all of those things that we worked on in 2016 are reflected in the general plan. So there needs to be a fair amount of coordination. So I think it's worthy of a specific an agenda item. I will be attending the workshop on the 24th, but would like an agenda item on that.
And just to go along with that, at 1 PS, there was a flyer distributed about those public meetings. I'll send that to you, Dan, and if you could distribute that to the commissioners, that would be great. Okay, thank you.
Real quickly, when I was at the 1 PS meeting last week, there was a request that apparently at the picnic in March, I want to say March 21st?
Yes.
Late in March, that in the past that there had been a citrus drop-off exchange bin that I guess was discontinued. I wasn't familiar with that, but they said it was a great idea, really no cost, and that people could drop some off swap them out, take some, and then anything left over would be donated to one of the food banks, well, in the desert, something like that. But it might be something that we could do for visibility. I don't know if we have a booth there, but if there was a citrus exchange or drop-off, I'd be happy to man it, so.
Okay. And we are planning to have a booth, so we can talk about that as we plan about what to do at the booth. Okay.
No comment.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much. Our next meeting will then be on March 17th at 5 p.m. Is there a motion to adjourn this meeting? Second? Okay. All in favor of adjournment, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
The meeting's adjourned.